Hi, and welcome to my house. I am going to show you how to do a precipitation reaction that ends with ricotta cheese. It's pretty easy, but does take a good bit of milk, so make sure that you have permission to actually use that much milk. Okay. To do this, you are going to need some milk, a strainer. I'm also going to use cheesecloth, which you can use, or you can use a regular strainer. You need some sort of acid, so that can be lemon juice or vinegar, and it can be any kind of vinegar. I'm using white vinegar, but you could use apple cider vinegar, a little bit of salt for flavor, and then a large pot to do the whole thing in. I'm using 2% milk. You could also use whole milk or 1%. I think you could technically use skim, but I'm going to be honest, if all you have is skim in your home, get help. Okay, you're going to add an entire half gallon to the large pot, and then you're going to basically bring it until you are just at a simmer, not quite to a boil, but close. So here's the basics of how this works and why we are taking all of these steps. Milk has some proteins in it. One of them is called whey. And if you remember what proteins are from biology last year, they're long strings of amino acids. And they're bundled up in such a way that the polar parts, which like water, are on the outside, and the non-polar parts that don't like water are on the inside. So that's just kind of their normal state. This is easily dissolved in water, so that's why you don't notice it as a solid in your milk, because it's not solid, it's dissolved, and so it seems perfectly smooth to you. You don't notice it. When we heat it up, what we get is we get another version of this exact same protein. All we do really is we unbundle it, and this is called denaturing a protein. And so that's what the heat does. So this is still aqueous, and so it's still dissolved in water. I mean, you don't notice solid chunks showing up in your milk just because you heated it. And the whole point here is that we're getting it ready for the reaction. So now this is ready for the reaction that we're going to do. Casein is another protein that is present in milk. And this one, it might denature to a certain degree from the heating process, but not as significantly as the whey protein does. But the casein protein is also aqueous, dissolved. You don't notice it as a solid. Then we add acid to the reaction, and so what that does is that allows these two to come together in what you can kind of think of as maybe a synthesis reaction. It's called cross-linking. And the whey and the casein now form what's called a coagulate. And this is a solid. So since we formed a solid, we have now made a precipitate, which means that we now have chunky milk, and that is really gross. But back to the kitchen. It looks like we are just now ready to simmer, so I'm going to turn the heat off, and we're going to do our precipitation reaction. For the precipitation itself, we're going to pour in our acid. It's about 1/3 cup all at once, and then give it one really quick stir. You can see precipitate forming already. It's disgusting. Okay, all these solid chunks. That will be good eventually, I promise. Okay, so we're going to let this sit for about 10 minutes. So now we're ready to do the straining. I have a strainer lined with cheesecloth. If you don't have cheesecloth, that's fine. You can just use a regular strainer. You just might lose some of the smaller bits. And be careful when you're pouring because it's pretty hot, and since it's kind of chunky now from the precipitate, it might splash a little bit. Gross. Look at all that precipitate. I promise it tastes good. Okay, so let that strain a little bit. Get some of that water out of there. Then we're going to rinse it with some cold water because there is still vinegar in there. We really don't want to be tasting that. So now you can see with the extra liquid strained out that we have a pretty creamy ricotta here. So again, I'm just going to give this a little rinse with water, and then I'll squeeze out some more of that moisture. Once you've taken it out and you've gotten all the moisture out, give it a taste to make sure that all of the acid is gone. You don't want vinegar taste. And then stir in as much salt as you want based on how you like your cheese. And there you have it, a bunch of easy, tasty precipitate. And also now you can appreciate my amazing t-shirt.